and thinking to myself, do you all know who I am? And of course, I'm nobody. But I'm thinking, do you know who I am? Because I am somebody. In fact, I am actually a rock star already. Because in my heart, I was.
For decades, Stevie Nicks has cast a spell over generations with a haunting voice, poetic lyrics, and enigmatic presence. But behind the flowing scarves and mystical allure lies a love story that has remained hidden until now. A secret romance shaped her music, fueled her greatest songs, and left an indelible imprint on her soul. Who was the man that held her heart captive for so long? What untold emotions lie beneath the melodies we know by heart? Tonight, we uncover the passion, heartbreak, and enduring love that defined her journey. From fleeting affairs to devastating breakups, these relationships weren't just headlines. They were the lifeblood of her artistry, the pain, the longing, and the dreams that turned into heartbreak. Each chapter in her love life became the soundtrack to a generation. This is the untold love story of Stevie Nicks, a woman who loved deeply, lost painfully, and turned every broken piece into music that would last forever. She was a dreamer with a voice like no other. He was a quiet, brooding guitarist with undeniable talent. When Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham first met in high school, neither could have imagined they were about to embark on a love story that would shape the future of rock and roll. Their first encounter wasn't a whirlwind. It was a simple moment between two teenagers who shared a love for music. Yet something sparked between them, something unspoken but undeniable. Their voices blended in a way that felt almost predestined, as if the universe had already written their future in harmony. After high school, they drifted apart until fate stepped in 2 years later. Lindsey, now playing with a psychedelic rock band called Fritz, needed a singer. Without hesitation, he called Stevie. Without hesitation, she said yes. That single phone call changed everything. As the band took shape, so did their bond. Late-night rehearsals turned into stolen moments, and songwriting sessions became love letters. Soon, their partnership extended far beyond the stage. Fritz became their training ground, where they faced the brutal realities of the music industry, opening for rock legends like Jefferson Airplane and Janis Joplin, and sharing stages with the very artists shaping the counterculture movement. But despite the thrill of playing to packed crowds, Fritz never broke through. The industry was ruthless, the competition fierce, and soon the dream began to unravel. When the band fell apart in 1972, Stevie and Lindsey were left standing together, holding on to nothing but their love and a shared belief they were meant for something greater. Determined not to give up, they packed their lives into a beat-up car and drove to Los Angeles with nothing but a few dollars and a promise to make it work. The city was unforgiving, the dream harder to reach than they imagined. Stevie worked as a waitress and a cleaning lady, scrubbing the homes of the very people she dreamed of becoming, while Lindsey, ever the perfectionist, focused on their music with relentless determination. Their first real shot came in 1973 with the release of Buckingham Nicks, an album that showcased their chemistry in its purest form. His intricate guitar work, her ethereal voice, and harmonies that felt like magic. But the album flopped. No radio play, no hit singles, no sudden rise to fame, just another rejection. Still, rejection didn't break them. It only made them hungrier. Then, in 1974, fate called again. Mick Fleetwood, searching for a new guitarist for Fleetwood Mac, heard Lindsey's playing and was impressed. He offered him the spot on one condition: Stevie came too. It was a bold move that would change music history. Their addition to Fleetwood Mac was transformative. The struggling band suddenly had a fresh, intoxicating sound. Stevie's voice and magnetic stage presence, combined with Lindsey's raw talent, took them to heights they had only dreamed of. And then came Rumors, the album that defined not just their careers, but their relationship. By the time they began recording, their love was already crumbling under the weight of fame, endless touring, and creative tensions. Fights became explosive, their passion burning into something almost unrecognizable. Yet, in the midst of chaos, they created music that would endure for generations. Stevie poured her heartbreak into Dreams, a farewell wrapped in longing, while Lindsey answered with Go Your Own Way, a bitter, fiery anthem. These weren't just songs. They were public love letters and parting shots, performed in real time for the world to witness. Even after the romance ended, the fire between them never truly faded. The love they once had transformed into a bond too deep to break, a chemistry that refused to die. They spent decades performing together, their history woven into every note, every glance across the stage, every harmony carrying the ghost of what once was. Through breakups, reunions, and solo ventures, Stevie and Lindsay remained bound by music, by the past, and by the echoes of a love story written in chords and melodies. In the end, it was never just about the songs. It was about them, their love, their heartbreak, their passion, their war. It wasn't about who left who, the fights, the betrayals, or the years lost. It was about the music they created together, a legacy that would outlive them both. Los Angeles in the 1970s was a world of smoky bars, endless jam sessions, and a music scene where legends were made overnight. It was in this electric atmosphere that Stevie Nicks crossed paths with J.D. Souther, a man who wasn't just another musician, but an established songwriter deeply embedded in the West Coast rock movement, with his name etched into the foundations of the Eagles, co-writing some of their biggest hits. His sound was smooth, sophisticated, and effortlessly cool, and for a brief moment in time, he and Stevie found themselves swept into a whirlwind romance. Their connection was instant. They spoke the same language, the language of melodies and lyrics, of long nights spent dissecting songs and dreams. Souther was different from the men Stevie had loved before. He wasn't caught in the same cycle of chaos that Fleetwood Mac thrived on. He was steady, self-assured, a man who understood the industry without letting it consume him. He saw her not just as a rock star, but as an artist in her own right, and for Stevie, it was refreshing. With Lindsay, love had been tangled in ambition and resentment. With Mick, it had been forbidden and fleeting. But with J.D., there was no war to fight, no lingering wound to navigate. It was simple, easy, and in its own way, that made it even more dangerous. Souther introduced Stevie to a side of the music world that wasn't driven by tension or heartbreak. He was a songwriter first, someone who could craft a story in 3 minutes and leave listeners aching for more. His influence on her was undeniable. He showed her how to refine her writing, how to strip a song down to its core and let the emotion do the work. But beneath the sweetness of their romance, there was an undercurrent of something unspoken. Stevie had spent years proving she was more than just someone's girlfriend, more than just a singer attached to a famous band. She was building something of her own, something that couldn't afford to be overshadowed by another man's success. And though J.D. respected her talent, Stevie couldn't ignore the way the industry still saw women. She watched as male songwriters, producers, and musicians were given credibility that women had to fight tooth and nail to earn. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to risk becoming someone's supporting act. Deep down, she knew that if she stayed, if she let herself melt into the comfort of his world, she might lose the fire that had carried her this far. Their romance, while passionate, was never meant to last. The very thing that brought them together, their shared love for music, was also the thing that pulled them apart. Stevie was on the brink of launching her solo career, ready to step out from Fleetwood Mac's shadow and prove she could stand on her own. For that to happen, she couldn't be defined by another relationship. She had to be Stevie Nicks, not Stevie Nicks, J.D. Souther's girlfriend. So she walked away, not in anger, not in heartbreak, but in quiet understanding. She chose her independence, her music, her own path. Though their time together was short, its impact stayed with her. Echoes of their relationship found their way into her songs. After the glitter fades carried the wistfulness of their time together, a reflection of love that was beautiful but ultimately unsustainable. She rarely spoke about J.D. in interviews, but the respect she held for him was clear in the way she talked about songwriting and the lessons she had learned. Theirs wasn't a story of tragedy or betrayal. It was a fleeting chapter in the long, complex novel of Stevie Nicks' life. A relationship that existed not to break her, but to remind her of who she was and who she was meant to become. In the end, that was enough. But not all love stories in Stevie's life ended with quiet acceptance. Some were messy, combustible, the kind of mistakes that could shatter a band. Stevie Nicks and Mick Fleetwood were more than just bandmates. They were family, bonded by music, fame, and the chaotic whirlwind that was Fleetwood Mac. Yet in the late 1970s, in the eye of the storm, they crossed a line. It wasn't planned. It wasn't even expected. Mick was married. Stevie had just walked away from Lindsay. Their relationship had always been built on trust, respect, and a deep creative connection, But somewhere between endless tours, late-night recording sessions, and the emotional wreckage left behind by past loves, something shifted. What started as friendship became something else, a stolen moment, a secret they weren't ready to admit even to themselves. The affair burned fast and bright, but it was never built to last. Mick was the leader of Fleetwood Mac, the glue that held the band together. Stevie was its biggest star, the voice that had captivated millions. Together, they had everything, except the ability to make it work. Their romance remained hidden from the public, but within the band, the tension was impossible to ignore. Lindsay knew, Christine knew, John knew, and no matter how hard they tried to keep it from seeping into the music, it did. The unspoken glances, the shift in energy, the quiet, resentment, it all became part of the atmosphere in a band already teetering on the edge of dysfunction. Then, just as quickly as it began, it ended. Mick, struggling with his own demons, called it off. His marriage had already collapsed under the weight of it all, and his affair with Stevie only added to the wreckage. For Stevie, it was another heartbreak, another lesson in love and loss. But unlike Lindsay, Mick wasn't someone she could fight for. He was brilliant, complicated, self-destructive, and deep down, she knew he would never be hers. The fallout was inevitable. The band had already survived the breakup of Stevie and Lindsay. Could it survive this? Somehow, yes. Fleetwood Mac had a way of enduring the unendurable. The pain, the betrayal, the mistakes. It all became part of their story, woven into the music that defined them. Stevie channeled her heartbreak into her songs, letting the pain bleed into the melodies. Sire, one of her most haunting and personal tracks, was a love letter to what could have been a whisper of a life that slipped through her fingers. The lyrics carried a quiet sadness, a longing for something never real enough to hold on to. Mick buried himself in the music, in the madness of keeping the machine running. His relationship with Stevie would forever be one of the great what ifs in rock history, a love that burned brightly but was never meant to survive. Stevie became another piece of history, another chapter in the tangled web of love and heartbreak that was Fleetwood Mac. Looking back, she has called the affair a mistake, one that hurt people, one she regrets, but she's never denied the truth of it. The connection between them was real, even if fleeting, and like everything in her life, she turned it into art, into something that would last forever, because in the world of Fleetwood Mac, nothing was ever simple. Love and music, pain and passion, they were always tangled together, inseparable. And for Stevie Nicks, that was both the greatest gift and the deepest curse. The moment Stevie Nicks and Don Henley met, the chemistry was undeniable. She was a reigning queen of rock and roll, the bewitching voice behind Fleetwood Mac. He was a mastermind behind the Eagles, a songwriter with a voice as smooth as a California sun. They weren't just rock stars, they were icons. And when two forces like that collide, the impact is unforgettable. Their connection was electric, built on late-night conversations, shared stories from the road, and a mutual understanding of what it meant to live under the crushing weight of fame. They weren't simply two musicians falling into romance. They were survivors, navigating the highs and lows of a world that demanded everything from them. For a while, it was easy, the music, the laughter, the comfort of being with someone who understood the life they lived. But in their world, love was never just about love. There were schedules, tours, egos, and expectations. And then came the moment that changed everything. Stevie was pregnant. The news hit like a tidal wave, crashing into a relationship never built for stability. They were both at the peak of their careers, their lives ruled by recording sessions, sold-out shows, and the relentless pressure to remain legends. There was no room for a baby in the whirlwind. It wasn't an easy choice. Stevie had spent her life fighting for her independence, for her music, for the freedom to live on her own terms. Motherhood was something she had always dreamed of, but not like this. Not with a man who wasn't ready. Not when the world was pulling her in a million different directions. And so, she made the hardest decision of her life. She ended the pregnancy. It was a choice that would haunt her for years, a wound that never fully healed. It wasn't just a loss of a child. It was a loss of a life that might have been a version of herself she would never get to know. Don Henley never forgot either. He later revealed that, had the baby been born, they would have named her Sarah. The weight of that name followed Stevie into her music, finding its way into the aching lyrics of one of her most personal confessions. Sigh wasn't just a melody. It was a memory, a ghost of something that had once felt real. After that, things were never the same. Their romance, which had burned so brightly, began to fade, not with an explosion, but with a quiet unraveling. The pressures of fame, the unspoken grief, and the realization that they were never meant to build a life together led to the inevitable end. Yet the echoes of their love never truly disappeared. Stevie has said that Don Henley was one of the great loves of her life, a man who understood her in ways few others did. Their relationship left a mark, shaping her view on love, loss, and the sacrifices that come with being a woman in rock and roll. For Stevie, love was never simple. It was passion and pain, beauty and regret, all woven into the songs that would outlive them both. And though she walked away from Don Henley and from the life they might have had, she carried the memory with her, in every note, in every lyric, in every whispered line of a song that still haunts the world today. When Stevie Nicks walked into the studio to record Belladonna, she wasn't just making an album, she was making history. Standing beside her, shaping the sound that would define her solo career, was Jimmy Iovine. He wasn't just another producer. He was a visionary, a force of nature in the music industry. And before either of them knew it, their collaboration became something much more. Jimmy saw something in Stevie that few others did. He understood her not just as a singer, not just as Fleetwood Mac's frontwoman, but as a solo artist with a voice unlike any other. He knew how to push her, how to draw out raw emotion in her songs, how to make sure the world saw her the way he did. In the long hours of recording and the late nights chasing perfection, something shifted. The boundaries between producer and artist blurred, and suddenly they weren't just making an album. They were falling into something deeper. Their relationship was intense and passionate, built on mutual respect and a shared obsession with music. But it was also complicated. Stevie wasn't used to being produced. She was used to fighting for creative control, used to making music on her own terms. Jimmy, on the other hand, was a perfectionist who thrived on control, shaping artists into stars. As much as they loved each other, that dynamic was always there between them. Belladonna became their love story. Every song, every note, every lyric infused with the energy of their relationship. But as the album took off, so did the cracks in what they had built. Jimmy was determined to make Stevie the biggest solo artist in the world. But Stevie wasn't just his artist. She was his girlfriend, and the lines between their personal and professional lives blurred in ways neither could control. The pressure of success, the demands of the industry, and their clashing personalities began to pull them apart. Jimmy was used to being in charge, but Stevie refused to be controlled. She had spent her entire career proving she was more than just someone's girlfriend, more than just a woman tied to a man in power. No matter how much they cared for each other, she knew she couldn't lose herself in him. The breakup was inevitable. It wasn't explosive or dramatic. It was a slow unraveling of something that had been doomed from the start. Jimmy was devastated. He had lost not just a girlfriend, but an artist he believed in, a woman he had poured his heart and soul into. And Stevie? She walked away with an album that would become legendary, proof that she could stand entirely on her own. Even after their relationship ended, the music endured. The songs they created together, Edge of 17, Stop Dragging My Heart Around, became timeless testaments to the magic they had made, even if their love hadn't survived. Jimmy would go on to become one of the most powerful figures in the industry, shaping the careers of countless artists. Her reign as a queen of rock and roll and her solo career cemented in history, Stevie Nicks lived a life defined by passion, heartbreak, and music. Though some of her love stories were brief, their impact was undeniable. Proof that the most powerful relationships aren't always the ones that last forever, but the ones that leave a mark woven into music that never fades. Stevie had always believed in fate, in the idea that certain moments in life were meant to be. But in 1983, grief clouded her judgment and led her to make a decision that shocked even herself. She married Kim Anderson, the widow of her best friend Robin. It wasn't about love or romance. It was about loss, about holding on to anything that could keep Robin's memory alive. Robin had been more than a friend. She was Stevie's soul sister, the one who had stood by her through every storm. When Robin was diagnosed with leukemia, Stevie was devastated, and when Robin passed away just days after giving birth to her son Matthew, the pain became unbearable. Stevie wasn't just mourning her friend. She was mourning the future they had imagined, the laughter and memories that would never come. In the depths of her grief, She convinced herself that marrying Kim was the right thing to do, that she was stepping in to care for Matthew the way Robin would have wanted. But deep down, she knew it wasn't love, only desperation, a way to escape the loneliness and quiet the voice reminding her she had lost something irreplaceable. The marriage lasted only a few months before reality set in. Stevie wasn't meant to be a wife like this, nor to raise a child in a home built on sorrow. The weight was crushing, suffocating. She looked at Kim and Matthew and knew this wasn't right. Robin was gone, and no amount of trying could bring her back. The divorce was inevitable, not out of anger or betrayal, but the understanding that they had both made a mistake. Stevie walked away heartbroken, not only for herself but for Kim, for Matthew, and for Robin's memory. She had tried to do the right thing, but learned that love cannot be forced. The aftermath was brutal. She spiraled, losing herself in drugs, exhaustion, and the grief she had tried to outrun. The pain of losing Robin, the guilt of her choices, it all weighed on her like an anchor. She poured that pain into her music, into the aching melodies of Nightbird, into lyrics haunted by ghosts and love lost too soon. Looking back, Stevie calls it the biggest mistake of her life, but from that mistake came a lesson she carried forever. Grief cannot be rushed, healing cannot be forced, and real love cannot be built on. Thus, she carried Robin's memory not in marriage, but in music, in every song, every whispered lyric, every moment she stood on stage and let the world hear her heart, because that was what Robin would have wanted. Not a marriage built on sorrow, but a life filled with music, love, and the kind of magic that never fades. Stevie had known love in many forms, passionate, destructive, fleeting. But with Joe Walsh, it was different. It wasn't just romance or chemistry. It was deeper, unspoken. He was the one she called her great love, her soulmate, the man who understood her in ways no one else ever had. They met in the early 1980s, two rock legends living at full speed, both carrying the weight of success and the demons that came with it. Joe was already a guitar god, a key figure in the Eagles, a man whose talent matched his wild spirit. Stevie, at the height of her solo career, was balancing the chaos of fame with the chaos of her personal life. In the middle of it all, they found each other. Their love wasn't flashy or dramatic like her past relationships. It was real, quiet, sacred. They laughed together, understood each other's pain without words, and were equals not just in music but in life. When they were together, it wasn't about the industry, the expectations, or the pressure to be legends. It was just them. For the first time, Stevie felt she had found something that could last. But even the deepest love isn't always enough. Both were battling their own demons, addiction, exhaustion, the toll of years chasing success. The rock and roll lifestyle that had given them everything was also destroying them. Nights blurred into mornings, highs were followed by devastating crashes, and somewhere along the way they began losing pieces of themselves. Stevie wanted to save Joe. Joe wanted to save Stevie, but neither could. She saw the road they were on and knew how it would end. One of them would lose the other, not because of love, but because of the darkness threatening to consume them both. With a heart heavier than ever, Stevie made the decision to walk away, not because she stopped loving him, but because she loved him too much. If they stayed, they would destroy each other, and Joe knew it too. Their breakup wasn't filled with anger or blame, only heartbreak, pure and simple, the kind that never fully heals. Years passed, but the regret never left her. Losing Joe left a void in her heart she never truly filled. She carried that pain, poured it into her music, turned it into songs that whispered of love lost too soon. Has anyone ever written anything for you was more than a ballad? It was a love letter to Joe, born from a longing that never faded. Looking back, she calls him the love of her life, the one who could have been forever, the one she never stopped thinking about. But life had other plans, and sometimes even the greatest love can't fight fate. In the end, Stevie Nicks had many loves. Some burned brightly and ended in flames. Some left scars that never faded. But with Joe Walsh, it was different. He was the one she walked away from, the one she never stopped missing, the one she would have given everything to keep if only the world had been kinder to them both. And maybe that's a true tragedy of love. Sometimes, even when two people are meant for each other, the timing isn't, and all that's left is a memory, the music, and the echoes of what might have been.